The concert. I never knew the color of my jealousy until it painted the room a deep shade of indigo. It was the kind of color that made everything feel heavier, more serious than it should be. The walls closed in, the air thickened, and the room that had once been a sanctuary of love and joy now felt like a prison of doubt and inadequacy. I sat on the edge of the bed, my thumbs tapping a silent rhythm on the phone screen as I stared at the 2 concert tickets laid out before me. They were glossy and gleaming, the image of Taylor Swift smiling back at me, her eyes sparkling with the promise of a night filled with music and memories. I had bought them with the intention of giving my girlfriend, Lily, the surprise of a lifetime, the kind of gesture that makes the heart swell and the eyes fill with tears of happiness. But as she stood there, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, her eyes filled with a different kind of excitement, I realized that my grand romantic gesture might not be so grand after all. "It's just that he's a bigger Swiftie than you are," Lily said, her voice a soft melody that did little to soothe the storm brewing inside me. "You know how much he loves her, and I can't just leave him out. It wouldn't be fair." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sure, I get it," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. "It's just, I thought this was going to be our night." Lily's eyes searched mine, a hint of guilt flitting across her features. "It is," she assured me, taking a step closer. "It really is. But think about it. It'll be so much more fun with him there. He'll know all the lyrics, all the dance moves. And he's gay. There's nothing to worry about." "Yeah," I mumbled, not quite convinced. "I guess." Lily took the tickets from the bed, her thumb brushing against mine as she did. She leaned in to kiss my cheek, the scent of her favorite vanilla perfume filling my nostrils. "It'll be fine," she whispered, her breath warm against my skin. "We'll all have a great time. You'll see." I forced a smile, nodding my agreement. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, but I didn't want to ruin the excitement for her. I knew Lily didn't mean to hurt me, but the thought of sharing this moment with someone else, especially her friend Marcus, who I had never been able to fully trust, left me feeling more than a little uneasy. Marcus had always been the charming type, the kind of guy who could win anyone over with a wink and a smile. But there was something about the way he looked at Lily, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. The days leading up to the concert were a blur of mixed emotions. I found myself rehearsing conversations in my head, trying to come up with the perfect way to tell Lily how I felt without sounding like a jealous boyfriend. But every time I opened my mouth, the words got stuck in my throat, tangled in the fear of losing her. Meanwhile, Lily and Marcus were inseparable, their laughter echoing through the house as they swapped Swiftie stories and practiced their fan chants. It was like I was the third wheel in my own relationship, and it stung more than I cared to admit. The night of the concert finally arrived, and they asked me to drive them there. As we all piled into the car, the tension was palpable. Marcus was dressed head to toe in merch, his eyes sparkling with excitement as he sang along to every word of her latest album. Lily beamed beside him, her hand resting on his leg, and I couldn't help but feel like an outsider. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white, with the effort of keeping my emotions in check. Pulling into the packed stadium parking lot, I watched as fans of all ages streamed past, their faces alight with the same excitement that Lily and Marcus shared. The air was electric with anticipation, and the distant thump of the opening act's bass pulsed through the car windows. As we made our way toward the drop-off, I felt the pressure building, the need to voice my concerns growing stronger. But I held my tongue, not wanting to ruin the moment for Lily. I kissed her cheek, the coolness of her skin surprising against my flushed face. "You guys have fun," I said, forcing a smile. "I'll see you when you get home." But as the hours ticked by and the concert's end grew closer, no text messages or calls came through. The house was eerily quiet, each minute stretching out into an eternity of doubt and fear. I tried to watch TV, to distract myself, but the laugh track only served to highlight the emptiness. I paced the living room, glancing at the clock every few seconds, willing the hands to move faster. When the final encore should have finished, I was a wreck, my heart racing in my chest like a caged animal. With no way to quell the anxiety, I stumbled into the bedroom, the darkness enveloping me like a thick blanket. I collapsed onto the bed, the crumpled comforter cold and uninviting. My eyes drifted shut, my mind racing with images of Lily and Marcus lost in the music, sharing secret smiles, maybe more. And as the weight of my thoughts grew too much to bear, I fell into a restless sleep. The sound of the key in the lock jolted me awake, my heart hammering in my chest. The bedroom door creaked open, and the hallway light spilled in, casting a harsh glow on the floorboards. I sat up, blinking the sleep from my eyes, and watched as Lily and Marcus stumbled in, their laughter hushed and conspiratorial. They whispered to each other, their faces flushed, and eyes bright with excitement. The sight of them together, so close, so intimate, was a knife twisting in my gut. "Hey," Lily whispered, her smile wide as she saw me sitting up. She swayed slightly, and Marcus had to steady her. "It was amazing," she said, her voice breathless. "The best night ever." I nodded, trying to ignore the acid rising in my throat. "I'm sure it was." 3 months passed, a blur of forced smiles and awkward silences. The concert had changed things between us, a subtle shift that grew more pronounced with each day that went by. We talked less, kissed less, and when we did, it felt like going through the motions, a dance we'd learned by heart, but had lost the passion for. And then, one evening, as the sun painted the sky with strokes of orange and pink, Lily sat me down on the couch, her eyes wide and her hand trembling. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, her voice so soft it was almost lost in the hum of the TV. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy, a punch to the gut that left me gasping for breath. I turned to face her, the world around me spinning as I took in the sight of her, the tremble in her hand as she clutched a positive pregnancy test. Her eyes searched mine, a storm of emotions swirling in their depths. Fear, hope, uncertainty. "Is it mine?" I choked out, the question echoing in the silence. The silence remained.
The lie. You know, sometimes I think about how people say that life is a journey. I mused to my best friend Marcus as we sat in the dimly lit bar, our whiskey glasses half empty. Marcus, a burly guy with a heart of gold, leaned in closer, curiosity piqued by my sudden introspection. "What's on your mind, man?" I took a deep breath, my eyes glazing over as I recounted the tumultuous day. "It's Rachel. I caught her." The air grew thick with tension as he processed my words. "You don't mean—" "Yeah," I nodded solemnly. "With that asshole from her office, right under my nose." Marcus's hand clenched around his glass, knuckles whitening. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." I replied, my voice a blend of anger and despair. But I can't just let it slide. The jukebox in the corner played a sad melody, the kind that seemed to resonate with the weight of my revelation. Rachel and I had been together for 3 years. We had talked about marriage, kids, the whole 9 yards. Yet here she was, betraying me in the most callous way possible. The whiskey burned my throat as I swallowed the rest of my drink, the amber liquid offering a temporary reprieve from the fire of betrayal in my chest. I need to get out of here, I said, sliding off the bar stool. Marcus followed suit, his sturdy presence a comforting constant as we stepped into the cool evening air. The neon lights of the bar flickered in the puddles from an earlier rain shower, casting an eerie glow on the deserted street. As we walked to my car, he threw out suggestions for revenge, each more ludicrous than the last. But I knew deep down that wasn't the answer. I had to come up with something that would hit her where it hurt, something she'd never see coming. And that's when it clicked. I would lie. I would tell her that I had been cheating on her all along. It was a twisted plan, but it was all I had. I needed to regain control of the situation, to show her what it felt like to be the one deceived. The engine of my car roared to life, and I felt a strange sense of resolve wash over me. Thanks for listening, Marcus, I said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. I've got to go talk to her. He clapped me on the back. Do what you gotta do, man, but remember, she's not worth it. I nodded, not entirely convinced. As I drove through the quiet streets, the headlights cutting through the darkness, my thoughts raced. This was it. I was about to embark on a twisted journey of deceit, all because Rachel had decided to take a detour of her own. When I arrived at our apartment, Rachel was already there, her eyes red from crying. She looked up at me, guilt etched into every line of her face. I'm sorry, she blurted out before I could even say a word. I know, I replied calmly, shutting the door behind me, but so am I. Her eyes widened in shock. What do you mean? I've been cheating on you too, Rachel, I lied, my voice steady. For just as long as you have. The colour drained from her face, and she stumbled back as if I had physically struck her. It was a low blow, but in that moment I didn't care. I was hurt, and I wanted her to feel the same pain. Her voice trembled as she spoke. What? No, you couldn't have. Why didn't you tell me? Why should I have? I shot back. You didn't bother to tell me about your little office romance. The room grew colder as our words hung in the air, thick with accusation and hurt. Rachel sank to the floor, her legs giving out beneath her. But I thought we were happy, she whispered, her voice barely audible. So did I said, my tone now heavy with sadness, but apparently we were both wrong. The lie had left my lips, and there was no turning back now. This was the start of a new chapter in our story, one filled with deceit and pain. But I had made my choice, and I had to live with the consequences. Rachel's face crumpled as she stared at me in disbelief. Who? She choked out, desperation clinging to every syllable. Does it matter? I retorted, my voice devoid of emotion. You had your who, and now you know I had mine. Her eyes searched mine, looking for a glimmer of truth or a hint of regret, but she found neither. The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall, the seconds stretching into an eternity as we stared at each other, the chasm of deceit growing wider between us. I need to think, Rachel murmured, getting up from the floor. She retreated to the bedroom, her steps unsteady, leaving me in the living room with the echoes of our shattered trust. I sat down on the couch, the fabric cold and unforgiving beneath me. The gravity of what I had just done began to sink in. The lie I had told was a grenade thrown into the foundation of our relationship, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be repaired. But as the anger subsided, the doubt began to creep in. Was this the right move? Would this make her feel the same agony she had caused me? The door to the bedroom slammed shut, the sound reverberating through the apartment like a gunshot. I leaned my head back, eyes closed, trying to compose myself. I could hear her muffled sobs from behind the door, and each one felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I had hurt her, deeply. But wasn't that the point? To make her feel the same way she had made me feel? Minutes turned into hours as I sat there, contemplating the path we had taken. Rachel's sobs had quieted, but the tension remained palpable. I knew she was in there, lying on our bed, our shared bed, thinking about the web of lies we had woven around us. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the vibrant life our apartment had once held. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to face her, to see the damage I had done. I approached the bedroom door, my hand hovering over the knob. I took a deep breath and turned it, stepping into the room we had once shared so many laughs and secrets. Rachel was lying on the bed, her back to me, the moonlight casting a silver glow on her tear-stained cheeks. "Rachel," I whispered, my voice raw with emotion. "I'm sorry." Her body stiffened, but she didn't turn to face me. "What's the point?" she said, her voice thick with pain. "We're both liars now." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had wanted to hurt her, but now all I felt was the weight of our shared deceit. We were both lost in a sea of unfaithfulness, and I wasn't sure we could ever find our way back to shore. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hand tentatively reaching out to touch her shoulder. She flinched at first, but she didn't pull away. "We can work through this," I offered, hoping the words didn't sound as hollow to her as they did to me. But Rachel just lay there, unmoving. "Can we?" she asked, her voice small and broken. "Or is this just the beginning of the end?" The room remained still, the air thick with the unspoken understanding that our relationship had been irrevocably changed. The journey we had started together had taken a dark turn, and I wasn't sure we would ever find our way back to the light. In the following months, Rachel and I worked tirelessly to repair the damage. We attended couples therapy, sharing our deepest fears and insecurities with a stranger who listened without judgment. It was a painful process, like picking at a scab that never quite healed. Each time we talked about it, the wound reopened, but slowly it began to scab over, forming a new layer of trust. A year later, we had managed to rebuild our relationship. We had become experts at avoiding the subject of infidelity, dancing around the elephant in the room with practiced grace. Rachel had moved past the betrayal, her eyes no longer filled with accusation every time she looked at me. But for me, the lie remained a constant thorn in my side. One night, unable to bear the weight of her deceit any longer, I decided to go to a bar on the other side of town, a place Rachel and I had never been to together. The neon lights and the distant sound of laughter offered a brief respite from the quiet tension that had taken up residence in our apartment. As I nursed my drink, I felt a presence beside me. I looked up to find a beautiful brunette in her early 20s smiling at me. She had a contagious energy that made me feel alive again, a stark contrast to the numbness that had consumed me since the day I caught Rachel. We hit it off instantly, bonding over our shared love for obscure indie bands and a mutual disdain for avocado toast. She had a wicked sense of humour that had me doubled over with laughter, and her eyes sparkled with a mischief that was both alluring and disarming. Her name was Lena, and she was a student at the local university, studying psychology. As the night grew late and the bar began to empty, she leaned in and whispered, "Do you want to come back to my place?" I hesitated for a moment, the weight of my unactioned lie to Rachel heavy on my conscience, but the allure of escape was too strong. I nodded, and soon we were tangled together in the back of a taxi, our laughter mixing with the hum of the engine. Lena's apartment was small and cluttered, a reflection of her youthful spirit and boundless curiosity. We barely made it through the door before we were tearing at each other's clothes, our kisses fueled by a year's worth of unspoken desires and pain. We made love until 4 a.m., our bodies intertwined like two lost souls searching for refuge in each other's arms. It was a feeling, emotionally and physically, I hadn't felt in years. The raw passion and the thrill of something new were a heady cocktail that intoxicated me. Rachel and I had grown stale, our love buried under the weight of our deceit and the mundanity of daily life. With Lena, there were no expectations, no history to navigate, just the pure, unbridled connection of two people in the moment. But as the sun began to peek through the blinds of Lena's apartment, the reality of what I had done crashed down on me. I had told Rachel that I had been cheating, not knowing if I had the courage to actually go through with it. Now here I was, in the arms of another woman, my heart racing with excitement and guilt. I kissed Lena goodbye, the taste of her lips a sweet but bitter reminder of the line I had crossed. As I stepped into the crisp morning air, the weight of my decisions settled in my stomach like a lead balloon. I knew I had to go home to Rachel to face the music. When I walked through the door, Rachel was sitting at the kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee in front of her. She looked up, her eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. She knew something was off, the scent of another woman clinging to me like a second skin. But she didn't say a word. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, I broke the silence. "Rachel, I need to tell you something." My voice was hoarse, the words sticking in my throat like a jagged rock. Her eyes searched mine, a mix of fear and hope. "What is it?" "The night I found out about you and him," I paused, unable to say his name. "I told you I had been cheating too." Her expression didn't change. She just nodded, waiting for me to continue. "It was a lie," I admitted, the words coming out in a rush. "I did it to hurt you, to make you feel the way I felt. But last night I realized I can't live with that lie anymore. I went out and..." I took a deep breath. "I met someone." Her hand trembled as she brought the coffee cup to her lips, the liquid sloshing over the rim. "What happened?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil I knew she was feeling. I slept with her," I confessed, the words heavy with regret. "But it's over. I'm coming clean because I want to fix us. I want to move forward, honestly." Rachel set the cup down, her eyes never leaving mine. "Okay," she said simply. "Let's do that." We spent the next few weeks in a whirlwind of apologies and promises. We had a long road ahead of us, but we were both willing to walk it. We talked about our feelings, our fears, and what we wanted from our relationship. Rachel agreed to forgive me, but she made it clear that trust was something I had to earn back. As for Lena, she remained a fleeting memory, a ghost of a night that had changed my life. I never saw her again, and I never told Rachel about her. It was a secret I carried with me, a constant reminder of the price of deceit. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real. We had faced the darkest parts of ourselves, and had come out the other side, scarred but stronger. Rachel and I had climbed out of the abyss we had fallen into, and had built something new, something more solid on the foundation of our shattered trust. But every now and then, when Rachel looked at me with those questioning eyes, I knew she was wondering if I had really changed, if I had truly learned the lesson our lie had taught us. And deep down, I wondered too. The taste of that one night of freedom lingered on my tongue, a temptation that I had to push away every day. But for Rachel, I swore I would be the man she deserved, the man who had learned the value of honesty. And so, we continued on our journey, each step a little less painful than the last. Our story was no longer one of deceit, but of redemption and growth. We had survived the storm, and now we had to learn to live in the quiet aftermath.
Whatever comes next. The house was eerily quiet. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked away the seconds, each one echoing through the emptiness like a ghostly heartbeat. It was a stark contrast to the usual pattern of laughter and bustling footsteps that once filled the space. Now, it was just me and the silence, a deafening reminder of the life that had unraveled before my eyes. "You okay?" my friend Mark asked, placing a hand on my shoulder. His eyes searched mine for any sign of the turmoil I knew was evident on my face. I nodded, a feeble attempt to convince him, and maybe myself, that I could handle this. "Yeah," I lied, my voice strained. "Just a lot to process." We sat in the living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes and the discarded remnants of a marriage that had been a lie for longer than I cared to admit. Photos of my wife, Rachel, and the boy who wasn't my son stared back at me from the mantel. The resemblance was uncanny. It was a cruel twist of fate that had kept the truth hidden for so long. Rachel had been gone for a week now. Her suitcase and her secrets both vanished in the dead of night. The quiet was a strange new normal, one that seemed to amplify every little sound in the house. The fridge hummed in the kitchen, a mournful tune that seemed to speak to the hollowness in my chest. I picked up a photo of the three of us, taken at the beach. The boy's hair was a shade darker than mine, and his smile a mirror of Rachel's. The ocean breeze had ruffled her hair, and she looked so happy. Happy and beautiful and utterly deceptive. The rage that had once consumed me had faded to a dull ache, leaving in its wake a deep sadness that seemed to seep into my very bones. "You should talk to him," Mark suggested gently. "He's going to need to know the truth." The truth. The word hung in the air like a lead balloon, heavy and unwieldy. How could I explain to a 4-year-old that the life he knew was a lie? That the man he called Daddy wasn't his father at all? "I know," I murmured, setting the photo down. "But I just don't know how." We sat in silence for a while longer, the clocks ticking, the only conversation in the room. Finally, I stood up, the decision made. "I'll talk to him tonight," I said firmly, my resolve setting like cement. It's time he knew. The evening was a blur of nerves and stilted conversation. I could see the confusion in the boy's eyes, the way he studied me as if I were a puzzle he couldn't solve. When bedtime came, I tucked him in, my heart feeling like it was being squeezed in a vice. "Can I tell you a story?" I asked, hoping it would be a good starting point. He nodded, his eyes wide and hopeful. "Once upon a time," I began, "there was a man who thought he had the perfect family. But sometimes, things aren't always as they seem." The words flowed out of me, a mix of honesty and pain, weaving a tale that was all too real. His eyes searched mine as I spoke, trying to understand the gravity of what I was saying. And the man, I concluded, learned that love isn't about blood. It's about the moments you share, the memories you create, and the love you choose to give. He was quiet for a moment, then reached up and hugged me tightly. "I love you, Daddy," he whispered. My eyes filled with tears as I hugged him back. "And I love you, buddy," I said, my voice cracking. "More than anything." The silence in the room was no longer deafening. It was filled with a love that was real, a bond that no DNA test could ever break. And as we lay there, my son's tiny body warm against mine, I knew that together we would face whatever came next.
Mountainside Pass. The morning air was sharp, the kind that stung your cheeks if you didn't blink fast enough. I sipped my lukewarm coffee, the taste of it bitter on my tongue, as I steered my car along the mountainous highway. The sun had barely crested the horizon, casting a pale glow over the towering pines that lined the road. The silence was a comforting blanket, wrapping around the car's metal frame, muffling the hum of the engine. A sudden movement in the corner of my eye made me jerk the wheel. A flash of brown fur and panic-stricken eyes filled my vision as a dog darted into the path of my oncoming car. Time slowed, the caffeine in my veins turning to ice as I stomped on the brakes. The tires screeched, the sound echoing off the rock face to my left. The dog looked at me, frozen in terror, as the world around us spun out of control. The car skidded, a sickening crunch as metal met gravel. The steering wheel jerked in my hands, fighting my desperate attempts to avoid the inevitable. The world outside the windshield blurred into a mosaic of brown and green, the horizon tilting precariously. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat feeling like it might be my last. The dog had vanished, forgotten in the face of the approaching abyss. My thoughts raced, a jumbled mess of what-ifs and I-should-haves. But amidst the chaos, a strange calmness took hold. It was as if my brain had decided to play a movie reel of my life's most poignant moments, a silent narrative that began to unfold before my eyes. The first images that danced across the screen of my mind were of my wedding day, my wife's smile radiant as she whispered her vows. But the scene shifted, grew darker, and the shadow of doubt began to creep in. I saw her laughing with a man whose features grew clearer with each passing frame. It was my cousin, a man who had always been more like a brother to me. The images grew more vivid, more painful. Stolen glances, secretive whispers, and a look of guilt that now, in this moment of terror, made perfect sense. My mind raced back to missed calls, forgotten promises, and the way she had started to avoid my touch. It all pointed to one devastating truth. She'd been cheating on me. The car lurched again, and the realization hit me like a sledgehammer. The pain washed over me, a tsunami of betrayal and heartache that I had never anticipated. Yet, as the car continued to plummet, there was something almost freeing about knowing the truth. The mask had been ripped away, leaving behind a raw, exposed wound that I would never get the chance to heal. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the steering wheel, the car now a hurtling projectile towards the jagged rocks below. The scream that had been building in my chest never made it past my lips. Instead, I took a deep breath. The taste of metal and fear thick in the air. With a strange clarity, I accepted my fate. If this was the end, I would face it with my eyes open. The truth of my life's final moments laid bare before me. The windshield shattered into a million shards, the cold mountain air rushing in like an icy embrace. And as the world went dark, the last thing I felt was not fear, but a burning anger that I had been denied the chance to confront her, to demand answers that now lay buried with me.